Hello, hello. Hey there, and welcome back to the Savvy Painter podcast. I am your host, Antrice Wood, and today we're wrapping up our series on the Create Spiral with what could be the most exciting phase of all, expansion. If you have been following along, we have moved through curiosity, resistance, exploration, alignment, and trust for the Create Spiral. So there's an acronym going on there. And if you haven't heard the other episodes, do not worry. It's totally fine. You can catch up later. But today we're on the final episode, the E in Create. And we're going to talk about what happens when you are finally ready to step out and be seen in a bigger way, when you expand on everything that you have gone through, everything that you have created before. This is where all of that internal work starts to show up externally. It's where you take strategic risks. And I really, really want to emphasize the word strategic here, because expansion isn't about taking massive leaps that terrify you. It's about understanding exactly how far you can stretch yourself without breaking yourself. What is expansion? So, expansion is the natural progression from trust. When you've learned to trust your voice, when you know who you are as an artist, at least in this moment, because please remember, you are allowed to evolve. So, when you know who you are as an artist, even if it's just right now, that's when you're ready to expand. And here's what I love about this phase: you're constantly cycling in and out of it. It's not like you reach expansion and then you're done, because you'll move through all of these phases over and over and over again in this beautiful upward spiral. Sometimes the whole cycle can happen in a season. Sometimes it takes a year. Sometimes it happens in a single painting session. But expansion is where you start taking calculated risks. Maybe you submit your work to your first group show. Maybe you decide to raise your prices. Maybe you start sharing your work on social media. Or maybe you approach a gallery that you've been admiring for a long time. The beautiful paradox of expansion is that it requires both tremendous courage and exceptional self-care. That's the part I love the most. It is also the part that most people completely miss out on. So let's talk about what this looks like. So I think of our capacity for risk as 3 concentric circles. So picture this with me. The innermost circle is your comfort zone. This is where you feel safe, you feel competent, you're relaxed, you're at ease, you know what to expect here. There's zero anxiety, there's no elevated heart rate. You can stay here indefinitely without feeling stressed out. The second circle is what I call your stretch zone. This is where you start to feel uncomfortable. But it's uncomfortable, but you can handle it. It's not so much that you are going to throw yourself off. So your heart rate might go up just a little bit. You might feel that buzzy tingle of anxiety in your body, but you can breathe through it. This is where all of the growth happens. Like, this is the magic zone. And then there's that third circle, right? So the middle one is your comfort zone, and then you move out from that, you're in your stretch zone. But if you go out of your stretch zone into the third circle, that's the terror zone. This is when you've gone too far. When you're here, you might experience even more pronounced physical sensations, like your chest gets really tight, or you get like that antsy feeling where you can't sit still. That's what happens to me. Like, I just get super, super antsy and I cannot keep my butt in the chair. Or sometimes I'll just feel really queasy in my stomach. And this zone is what typically leads to shutting down, procrastination, overwhelm. This isn't the zone that we want to be in. We actually want to avoid this zone. So let me give you a concrete example. Let's say that you have never submitted your work to a show before, and you start thinking about submitting your work to a group show, but even thinking about submitting might cause your heart rate to go up. That's the beginning of your stretch zone. So what you might do in that situation is you might start with visualization, just imagining yourself filling out the application, just imagining yourself opening up the website and downloading all the information you need, and just imagine your work hanging in the gallery. And notice how your body feels as you do that. Just notice what is happening. And if you start going into that, you want to push yourself into the stretch zone where it feels a little bit uncomfortable, but you can handle it. And then you pull yourself back into your comfort zone to recharge. Next, you might start doing research, right? So you might be looking up shows, you might be reading those submission guidelines that you download. And again, you're going to notice how your body responds. And maybe, I don't know, after 20 minutes of research, you start to feel overwhelmed. So you stop. You do something comforting and you come back to it another day. I actually did this thing the other day where I wrote down all of the things that I like to do just because I like to do it, that have no that like there's no ulterior motive for it. And I realized it took me a little while to do it because I noticed that I'm the type of person that I typically will have an ulterior motive for doing something. So if I take the dogs to the park, for example, the ulterior motive is, oh, I'm going to train them. I'm going to expose them to something new. I'm going to work on this one behavioral problem with them, right? That's not what we're talking about here. It would be like going to the park, even if I take the dogs, but going to the park just for the sake of going to the park and just being there and enjoying it. This is strategic expansion. Short bursts into your stretch zone, followed by intentional self care. Now, if you're more introverted, you might find that in that scenario that I just explained of not the dogs, the scenario, I mean, unless you have dogs and you're training them, but the scenario of submitting your work to a group show, you might find that if you're highly introverted, you might find that the research and preparation phase is much easier than actually submitting it. But actually submitting and putting yourself out there where you are going to potentially be judged by strangers, that might push you closer to your terror zone. If you're more extroverted, you might be fine with the submission part, but sitting alone with your own uncertainty about whether your work is good enough without being able to get reassurance from other people, that might be your bigger stretch. So it's going to be a little bit different for everybody, and it's unique to you. So what you want to do is just start to become very aware of how your body feels and not judge it, but just notice how it feels as you're going through different strategic moves that you make. The key to expansion is becoming aware of what's happening in your nervous system and how you in particular respond. And like I said, it's totally different for everyone. For me, when I'm too far out of my comfort zone and I'm moving into that zone where I'm approaching the terror zone, it's getting to, like the stakes feel really high. I experience a tightness in my chest. I get that antsy feeling that I talked about before. I just literally cannot sit still. Like I cannot keep my butt in any chair whatsoever. I'll get up and I'll go for a snack even when I'm not hungry. I will suddenly need to clean things in the house. I just need to get rid of this anxious energy I feel, but this buzzy feeling in my arms, I just need to like distract myself from it. And so those are some of the ways that it shows up for me. I also, a lot of times I will feel really queasy in my stomach. So it's just this like buzzy feeling in my stomach. And if I'm not paying attention, that's when I realize that's when I think like, oh, what I really need right now is, I don't know, popcorn or a cheese sandwich or chips or whatever it is. As you pay attention, you'll notice the nuance of how it feels for you. Maybe your shoulders tense up. Maybe you start talking faster. That's another really common one. Maybe your face gets flushed or your palms get sweaty. There's no right or wrong way to experience any of it. It's just how you do it. The most effective way that I've found to stay connected with these signals is very simple. It's almost like a lot of the things are so simple it just seems like too easy. But the simplest way to stay connected to what's actually happening and to really get to know these signals is to just name them. There's this saying, name it to tame it. And it's one of the simplest, most effective techniques that I use to bring me back to where I currently am and what is happening emotionally. So instead of just feeling anxious and trying to push through it or ignore it, what you do is you pause and you say, this is me feeling anxious right now. This is me feeling nervous. I'm nervous because this means a lot to me and I want it to work out. And right here, right now, I am okay. That simple acknowledgement often takes the edge off and it helps you make a very conscious choice about whether to continue stretching or to pull back and recharge yourself, to pull back and to allow yourself to get a little bit of self-nourishment. Okay, so this brings us to the recharging cycle. This is the part that most people completely overlook. And we have a lot of thoughts and feelings about recharging, about resting, about whether or not we deserve it. But after you stretch yourself, this to me is one of the most important pieces of it. After you stretch yourself, after you move into that stretch zone, you have to go back into your comfort zone. Right? So you have just pushed yourself outside of your comfort zone. You've done something that's scary for you. And once you've done that, you don't stay out in that scary place. You come back in to recharge your batteries. This is not optional. It's not a weakness. This is how you build the capacity to take progressively bigger risks over time. So that's what I meant when I said this is very strategic. Think about it like physical exercise. If you go to the gym and you do an intense workout, you don't immediately do another intense workout using those exact same muscles the next day. You're going to rest. You're going to recover. You let your muscles rest so that they can rebuild stronger. It's the exact same principle that applies to creative and emotional stretching. But here's the distinction I want you to understand. There is a difference between healthy recharging and avoidance. Healthy recharging looks like doing things that are intrinsically relaxing or enjoyable. Okay, right? Remember the dogs. Another example would be I'm reading a book for the pure pleasure of reading, not because I'm trying to learn something productive. I'm taking a bath because it feels good and I love the sense of the bubbles, not because I feel obligated to relax or not because I think like this is I have to do this relax thing now. I'm going for a walk because I just love being outside. Avoidance, on the other hand, is when you haven't actually stretched yourself. You've just been thinking about it. And your rest isn't really true rest. You're doing things like scrolling social media, you're mindlessly flipping through all the posts on Instagram, you're binge watching shows that you don't even like that much, or you're staying busy with whatever busy work you can come up with. So remember, like when I said, when I feel really antsy and stuff, I want to go clean. I want to go like, like I got to get that out. That's me avoiding what's actually happening. This is different because when you come out of this supposed rest, you feel even more tired and more lethargic than you did before because you haven't actually rested. When you've truly stretched yourself and then you have truly rested, you come back energized and you come back ready for the next small risk. I think a really great example of this is after an art show. Most artists feel absolutely exhausted after a show and need weeks to recover. Like I remember having my first solo show, and I think it was like a month and a half before I was ready to even to do anything. But as you learn this cycle, as you understand this cycle and you stop pushing yourself into the terror zone, you can take mini breaks during the process of preparing for the show. And because you do that, because you're aware of what's happening with your body, because you're aware of the things that are intrinsically depleting for you, or you're aware that I've just gone out into my stretch zone, so I definitely need to come back into my comfort zone. As you become more and more aware of that and you respond to that and you care for yourself in those situations, you're not nearly as depleted because you've been caring for yourself throughout the whole process. Now, I want to talk about the two most common mistakes that I see artists make in this phase. The first is pushing too hard too fast. This looks like doing something like submitting for 5 different competitions all at the same time when you've never done one before, or deciding to completely overhaul your entire social media presence in one weekend, or maybe raising your prices by like 200-300% overnight. When you push yourself too hard too fast, your nervous system goes into protection mode. You will find yourself shutting down. You'll find yourself procrastinating and feeling overwhelmed because your brain is trying to keep you safe by getting you to stop. The second mistake is the opposite. The second mistake is staying too small, staying too safe. This is when you've been in the trust phase for a while. You know who you are as an artist, but you're not taking any risks at all. You're just staying completely in your comfort zone. You're not pushing yourself. You're not trying. You're going through the motions. This leads to stagnation and often resentment because part of you knows that you are ready for more, but you're not honoring that part of you. You're not honoring your own growth. So the sweet spot is in between. The sweet spot is strategic, intentional risks that stretch you just enough to grow, but not enough to cause a panic attack. So, as an example, I want to tell you about one of my private coaching clients. I'll call her Sarah. Sarah has been selling her work at the same price for about 3 years, and she decided that she wanted to raise her prices. So she'd been at the same price point for 3 years, and she knew she was undervaluing herself. But the thought of actually changing her prices made her just go into this almost like full on panic attack. Like her heart would start beating really hard. She would just like get really, really antsy. So we started with visualization. She spent time imagining herself updating her website with the new numbers, right? Just sitting with that image until it felt less scary. And then she moved to research, looking at what other artists with similar experience were charging and calculating what she needed to make in her business to sustain her practice. With every step, she would notice how her body responded. Sometimes she could only handle like 5 minutes of this before she started feeling overwhelmed. So she would stop, she would go make a tea, maybe work on a painting, something that felt safe and familiar. Then she practiced having the conversation. First with me in a coaching session, then with a friend, another artist friend of hers, and finally she had the actual conversation with her gallery. By the time she got to that final step, she had built up so much confidence and so much familiarity with saying that price out loud that what had felt terrifying initially now felt completely manageable. And here's what's beautiful, because she had honored her nervous system throughout the process, she didn't burn out. She didn't get overwhelmed. She didn't freeze. She didn't retreat back into hiding. She was ready for the next expansion. And this is how the create spiral works, because here's what happened next for Sarah. Successfully raising her prices opened up a whole new world of curiosity. Now she was curious about applying to higher end shows. She was curious about collaborating and working with different galleries. She was curious about collectors and different markets and exploring those. So expansion naturally leads you right back to curiosity, and the cycle begins again. But every time you move through it, you're spiraling upwards. You're stronger, you're more resilient, you're more authentically yourself. And the beautiful thing about understanding this process is that it gets faster and easier. As you learn to recognize what's happening with your own nervous system, as you build your trust in your ability to care for yourself after having taken a big risk or even a small risk, right? The cycles get shorter. What used to take months might now take weeks. And what used to feel terrifying now feels like this could be a pretty interesting challenge. I think I'm going to check this out. So this isn't a one-time thing. You will spiral through this your entire career as an artist, and that's not a problem. It's not a bug, it's a feature. Going back to my video game days. This is how you continue growing. It's how you stay engaged with your work and how you keep surprising yourself with what you are capable of. So I want to give you some practical steps. If this resonates with you, here's what I suggest you try this week. Choose one small risk, and I mean very small. Maybe it's sharing one painting on Instagram when you usually keep your work private. Maybe it's entering a local show. Maybe it's having one conversation about your prices. Practice nervous system awareness. Check in with your body throughout the day. What does comfort feel like? What does a small stretch feel like? And where's the line into overwhelm? It's really important, though, when you do this, that you don't judge yourself, because for some people, what feels like a stretch, like what feels like a big stretch, is sending an email. And for somebody else, it might be having a one-on-one personal conversation with somebody. It doesn't matter what the stretch is. Meet yourself where you're at. Don't judge it, okay? So I want to put that caveat in there. Promise me that you will do that. Then I want you to plan your recharge time in advance. Don't wait until you're depleted. Build in time for that genuine rest and enjoyment. And then trust the process. Trust that you can handle whatever response that you get. Trust that you can take care of yourself after you take this risk. And I do want to say, though, as I think about this whole Create Spiral series, I just want to tell you that I'm just filled with admiration for all of you who are doing this work. Creating the art, putting yourself out there, continuing to grow, this takes tremendous courage. And if you've made it through this whole series, if you're thinking about expansion, that means that you've already come so far. You've moved through curiosity and resistance and exploration, alignment, and you've felt that trust in yourself. You're not the same artist that you were when you started. Inside Growth Studio, this is exactly the kind of work that we do together. We practice these expansions in a very supportive environment. I do somatic and mindset exercises to help you stay present and centered. We celebrate small wins, we celebrate big wins, and we hold abundant space for all of the scary parts. Because here's what I know about you. You have something important to share with the world, and your voice matters. Your perspective is needed, and you absolutely have the capacity to expand into the artist that you're meant to be. You don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to be fearless. You just have to be willing to take one small strategic risk and then take care of yourself afterwards. Okay, that's it. That's the whole secret to expansion. So thank you for taking this journey with me through the Create Spiral. I hope this framework serves you well, and I hope you'll share it with other artists who might benefit from understanding that all of this, The curiosity, the resistance, the messy exploration, the alignment, the trust, and yes, the expansion. It is all part of the beautiful, wild, essential work of being an artist. Have an amazing week. I will talk to you soon.